The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Thursdays here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager. Elijah Herbel, joined here in the studio yet again by our friend Will Wilson. You can find him on Twitter at Willie on the Radio, and you can find his show, The Morning Hookup, online. Google it up. Throw it in the old YouTube machine, The Morning Hookup. Him and his co-host Bill Hooks taking you through Monday through Friday every single day from 10 to 11. Will's in all week long for Chris Schmidt, who is off for the week, but back next week. And we're happy to have Will here in studio. Plenty of good stuff coming for you on a Thursday, as we'll have our usual Thursday appearance from Brandon Vogel. Brandon is back from the road trip to Pittsburgh, so we're going to have to get thoughts on how his road trip went, as well as his thoughts on what has officially been announced, the John Butler hire. We'll get into that here in just a moment. Coming up in hour two, we'll have Brian Christopherson. I know we're used to having Coach Gary Barnett with us on Thursdays. Barney, though, is unavailable. He is in Costa Rica, so he's on vacation, unavailable for now. We'll get caught up with Coach Barney next week, but we'll have Brian Christopherson leading off hour two, and then coming up at 5:40, another edition of Burke's Best Bets with one Danny Burke, the pride of Chicago. He'll be checking in. We'll get some thoughts on the Home Run Derby, the All-Star Game, and because I've been talking about it enough this week, I think we have to talk both the Euros and the Copa America final, which is coming your way on Sunday. I have the right to do so because it's kind of a dead sports weekend. So with all that in mind, Will, how are you doing today? It's good to have you in yet again in a dark studio today.
Yeah, these lights are bright, and I just thought I'd change it up a little bit. The day's been good, kind of quiet around here today, which is not a bad thing. Kind of gives us alone time, which is nice. But yeah, it's a good day. What about you?
Can't complain. I've been dealing, so obviously I've been filling in for Schmitty in the mornings as well.
Yes.
I get a nice little break midday for lunch. Sometimes I'll sneak in a little nap. And that was tough today because I had a couple of construction guys redoing the gutters on my house today.
Oh, good.
Which is good. It was well overdue. We had the roof done last week, gutters done this week. It's funny, the guys were complaining about the handiwork done by the roofing guys while they were working on the gutters, and I'm like, I'm going to act like I didn't hear that.
This roof sucks.
It's my, I don't own the place. I rent, so that's not my problem, but I was just trying to block that out. But they were quite loud today, so not much of a nap was had. Did enjoy my downtime during the day today, and I'm in here ready to rock for our Thursday edition of Hail Varsity. So a lot of good stuff coming your way today. We'll get to the Hail Varsity Radio starting five here in just a second. Got to get our tweet up first, though, so it's hard to type and talk at the same time. I'm going to try my best to do so. But as we look at the Hail Varsity Radio starting five, we started off. Broderick was first in today. Holy moly, he did it, says Broderick. So Broderick, congrats on being first into the Hail Varsity Radio starting five. The other Dave in second. Cliff is in third. Cliff saying he outran the feds today. Moonshining ain't easy. So congrats, Cliff. Not sure what to think of that one. Crew is in fourth. Crew is quite excited to be fourth. Michael says fourth, but I believe Michael is actually fifth. Crazy Spider Adventures comes in off the bench at number 6. KG, just a really, really good guy, in at 7. We also have the Real Matthew. I got a good DM in from the Real Matthew today. Maybe a talking point for later this week or next week on a quote from Big 12 Media Days today. It was on Sirius XM. Thank you, Matthew, for sending that over. I think we'll have to find some time for it once I'm able to pull the soundbite. We also have Patrick, Moonbot, Eric, NASCAR Eric is in. We also have that's same Eric. Jimmy is in. Jeff is in. Shane is in. Eat Beef is in. Sal is in. Let's not forget about Justin. Justin also in the stream as we speak to you here. So a pretty loaded lineup of folks online with us here on a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity.
I think it's funny how you say starting 5, but it turns into the starting 15.
Well, we get through the starting 5, and then we get to the folks coming in off the bench.
Cool.
So there's, your six man, which, that's kind of my role in the basketball court, much more of a six man. I bring some energy off the bench, occasional 3-point shot if it's fallen for me.
Yeah.
That's my role. You might be the same. We're similar basketball players in that way.
Well, I'm a better shooter, but
if I'm on, I'm on.
Yeah, that's what you say. You're kind of an annoying player to play with because you have height. You're tall. Why don't you get down low?
And I like to shoot through. I play defense well down low. Offensively, though, I don't have a well-defined post game. I always, because when you go to an open gym to go practice your game, which I did when I was younger, what do? You go step to the 3-point line and go chuck a 3.
Yeah.
1 to 15 times. Trevor chimes in the stream, can confirm Will's a better shooter.
Trevor knows. Thank you, Trevor.
Damn. Trevor's on my Cornhusker State Games basketball team next week, so I need some support. Thank you.
If you need a coach, let me know. Might be available.
It's possible. We had a coach lined up, but now he might be going to the Creed concert.
Okay.
Instead of supporting. So
let me know.
So we may need you in.
I've seen Hoosiers.
Is that what kind of offense would you have us run? I was thinking we run the Phil Jackson triangle offense.
Well, no, I wouldn't be there to tell you what to run. I would just be there to be in a suit and argue with the ref.
Okay, so you'd be what's the alcoholic guy's name?
Yeah, I don't remember his name in Hoosiers. I don't remember his name. Somebody in the chat will definitely know.
Yeah, no. But anyway, yeah, that's a great positive word of encouragement from Trevor, my teammate, saying Will is a better shooter. But back to my point. This is an aside. We'll get to Husker football here momentarily, I promise. As a youngster in the basketball floor, they'd always put me at the center. Mm-hmm. And defensively, I did pretty well there. Go straight up. I was a force in the low block in terms of trying to back me down. I did well there. I could box out. Offensively, though, it's hard to go practice a post game whenever you're going to the gym alone.
Yeah, it is.
It is. So what do? You go practice your jump shot. You go practice your handles. So I never really developed an offensive post game, and it leaves me feeling I'm like a stretch 5, maybe a stretch 4, but like defensively, I still go play down low. It's awkward.
So you're like a Kevin Love, but Kevin Love is an outstanding 3-point shooter. So I can't.
On my day, I'm a good 3-point shooter. If the first 2 go down for me, it's going to be a long day for the opposition.
I just hate giving you credit. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
We'll get to football here as we have plenty to get into. Coach John Butler officially announced. Quickly, though, I do want to just throw something out there. Ty Robinson hopping on Twitter today announcing an NIL deal, and it's always good to see the Husker student athletes getting some NIL deals. I won't mention the company. They're a local plumbing and water heater company here in town. They've offered the promotion one certain water heater that they have this fall. They'll install it this fall, and if Nebraska wins the Big Ten championship, they will refund your water heater at the end of the year, which seems like a good promotion.
Wow.
You can look into it if you want. I like the promotion, but it got me thinking, got my wheels turning.
Uh-huh.
Is it legal from a business point of view to go throw down some heat at the sports book on Nebraska to win the Big Ten title, and then use that money, should you win, to go refund your business for what would be a pretty massive expense, having to refund everybody? Is that legal? Is that right to do? Because it got me turned like, that's not a bad thought. Now that sports gambling is legal in Nebraska, a $5,000 bet, which I assume you'll make at least that much money with this promotion, because people are going to think, man, I get my water heater for free if Nebraska does well. I bet you they'll probably do $5,000 in business at least.
Probably.
If you go put down $5,000 at the sports book here in town, if Nebraska wins the Big Ten championship, it'll net you $100,000.
Wow. And so you're wondering if
this is a legitimate business strategy to offer this promotion and to go put down $5,000 at the sports book.
Well, I'm sure they would have,
Is that legal?
I'm sure they would have looked into it.
It only makes
before
sense,
doing it,
because then if you get $100,000 back, that's probably recouping your losses and then some.
Yeah.
Should Nebraska win the Big Ten title? I'm just wondering, is that a legal and legitimate business strategy?
Yeah, speaking of NIL, I'm sure you saw the news about the Georgia players. And this kind of goes along with Oklahoma State too. I don't know why these schools aren't making NIL deals with Uber so that these players can get free Uber rides. Something to think about.
Moonbot saying with that NIL, it's probably an insured promotion. I know Moonbot's done his fair share of insured promotions back in the day, which is usually what like those half court and full court shots you see at NBA and college games are.
Right.
Insured promotions. So somebody else will pay it off if somebody does in fact hit it. That's a good thought. We also have Ringer chiming in here. Along with Grant, he chimed in on Twitter saying the alcoholic coach's name in Hoosiers was Shooter.
Shooter. Got it.
So that could work for you. You could be Shooter off the bench for us.
What, you want me to show up drunk to the courts?
That could be electric.
No, not doing it.
No, our good friend Dave
Gonna get
from
arrested.
the Cornhusker State games would probably not like that. But I'm really looking forward to the Cornhusker State games. I hope our team is going to do well. Trevor, I could use less trash talking in the stream. Eric also chimes in and says heel assistant coach as well. So thank you for that offer, Eric. Next Saturday, I'll get you the schedule should you be so inclined. We'll take as many coaches as we can get. We're trying to win it all. We're playing in the bronze division, so we're not going to be any good most likely. We've never played together as a team. I think we want to hit an open gym at some point next week. I'll follow up later on the show should things go well. If things go poorly, you'll never hear about our Cornhusker State games performance. Anyway, to football we go. The official news coming down today, John Butler, as expected, has been named the defensive backs coach for Nebraska. The statement from Matt Rule today, who's on vacation.
How do you know that?
I got sources, Will.
That's kind of weird to know.
You should know this by now. You should know I got sources.
Can you let the man have a vacation?
I'm just saying, it's just... I'm just alluding to the fact that I don't think he gave this statement today. This has been in the works for a while. We've known it's been in the works for a while. There's some HR hoops you got to jump through to get John Butler announced. People were questioning it. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it in our stream. Why hasn't this been announced? It's been known this was coming. He's been working behind the scenes. I know he's been down doing some meetings as well as some film work this week. So he's been in town. He's been on campus. Anyway, long story short, the quote from Rule, John Butler is one of the premier defensive back coaches in football. He has a diverse coaching background and a history of being a part of winning organizations and elite defenses at the highest level of football. He will be an outstanding addition to the Nebraska football program and to our defensive staff. So that's the quote from Matt Rule on John Butler coming to the Husker football coaching staff. Already has his boots on the ground, and he will be getting going, already, but ASAP. As pen has been put to paper, and that is now done. Nebraska has their coaching staff, I assume, set in stone for 2024, barring any more late drama. I don't want to put that out there because, as we know, there's never a dull week in Nebraska. There always seems to be drama behind the scenes. But you'd think that with this move, Nebraska's coaching staff is set in stone. And the question I want to ask today, which I think is a multifaceted discussion, we're going to get Brandon's take on it here in about 8 minutes. We're also going to get thoughts from Brian Christopherson to lead off hour 2. How do you define success for the defensive backs and for John Butler in 2024? Because I think there's always going to be that easy out should the defensive backs not play well. Should the top-rated quarterback in EA Sports College Football, Shedeur Sanders, who we'll also get to a little bit later in the show, should he go and have a great day against Nebraska? Let's say he comes into Lincoln, God forbid, picks up the win. 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks type day for Shedeur Sanders. Do you blame the defensive backs and do you blame Coach John Butler? That's the question I think I have right now with this hire, because I don't want to go easy out with this guy, but it's hard for me to set expectations in that defensive back room now going into 2024 with this turnover and with... I accidentally hit a cue button in here. I'm not sure if that picked up on the mic.
I heard it.
Yeah, okay. So that did go out over the air. Apologies. But do you change the standard? Because Matt Rule's been big on the standard is the standard. We're going to have guys play up to the standard no matter what the circumstances are. But from a media and from a fan point of view, does this change your expectations for the defensive back room? And does this change what you think success is for the defensive backs in 2024, given the turnover? I guess, does it just change what you think the floor of the defense is in 2024?
It's hard just knowing how long it's been since Butler was in college. I don't know how much that matters. But like you said the other day, it sounds like, his players at Buffalo, were playing pretty well. I don't know. I think it all matters on how Cooper left the room. I think that's a big thing. If he left them in a pretty good spot, well, then, you're hoping Butler can come in and make them even better. Again, to me, it's just a big wait-and-see thing. I think, that room is a little concerning moving in. So, to me, it's just a big wait-and-see.
I'm kind of in the same boat as you, and that's kind of what makes it tough, because it's a defense that comes into this season with high expectations. Because when you discuss chasing the 3 points better Nebraska was chasing this offseason, we didn't talk much about the defense. You're looking at the offense and the special teams, being like, man, they can get you back 3 points. And the defense was kind of just an afterthought in terms of, well, they're gonna have their same standard as they had in 2023, and they're gonna even have less expectations, less pressure on them because of the fact that the offense, if they're able to hold up their end of the bargain a little bit better, it's gonna leave them on the field a little bit less. It's gonna set them up with their backs to the goal line a little bit less if you are able to control the turnover problem. So it's been an afterthought, that defense, in terms of are they going to be the same unit in 2024 they are in 2023? And it's fair with all the returning production you see. But does this coaching staff change here? And I want to get your thoughts in the stream. If you're watching along, you can give us a call too. 402-489-1240 is the number you can get in. Give us a tweet as well. Does this move this late in the offseason change your expectations for the defense and specifically the defensive back room in terms of the fact that, hey, if things don't go well early in the season, do you say, well, you know what? Coach John Butler was put into a tough spot. He had to make adjustments on the fly. This defensive back room had to make adjustments on the fly. Or on the flip side of things, does that Matt Rule message of the standard is the standard and we're going to have guys play up to the standard no matter what the circumstances is, we're going to find a guy who's going to play up to the standards if our starters aren't, is that the trump card here in this situation where, you know what, despite all these things that are happening off the field, you have to have a defense that plays up to the standard? And we saw, I think, a defense that was playing pretty close to the standard last season.
It definitely doesn't raise the expectations.
No.
That's for sure. So we'll see.
We'll get Brandon Vogel's thoughts on this coming your way after the break as Brandon joins us. We'll get his thoughts on the road trip to Pittsburgh as well, and maybe some quick thoughts on his experience on the Common Fan podcast talking Mike Riley. That's coming your way after the break here on Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Thursday here on Hail Varsity Radio. We are powered by Cornhead Lager, Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson joining you here on a Thursday as plenty of news and notes to get into today. John Butler officially announced as Nebraska's defensive backs coach. We'll get Vogel's take on that here in just a second. We also have a non-conference schedule release for Husker basketball. Will and I will get into that a little bit later this hour. And don't forget Brian Christopherson and Danny Burke also coming your way in hour 2 as well. But we welcome Brandon Vogel to the show. Brandon is back safely from Pittsburgh. And Brandon, we asked the question everyone's been wondering, how was the road trip?
It was pretty good. The two toddlers did really well, all things considered. I mean, they're just going to have to stop a lot, but for the most part, went as good as I could have hoped. So wrote about it a little bit on this week at counterread.com. Didn't kind of plot it out this way, but the way we ended up going, passed through SEC towns, Big 12, Big 10, and ACC. So we checked off all 4 power conferences, which wouldn't have been possible even a year ago.
Vogel, did you ever have to threaten to turn the car around or pull over?
No, I didn't. It never escalated to that level. It was more of a scramble mode of potty breaks. So I'll leave it at that.
And one thing we didn't get into last week that I want to ask you, are you a drive-through on a road trip kind of guy, or are you a pack sandwiches in the cooler kind of guy on a road trip?
I will pack a cooler, but mostly for drinks. I'm more of a drive-through guy. I'm pretty meticulous about the car, so I don't like a whole lot of stray French fries rolling around in the backseat.
It's unavoidable with toddlers, I think, just a little bit.
It's unavoidable with me. I'm 25. Come on.
That's Brandon Vogel with us here, his usual spot, a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, we haven't gotten a chance to get your thoughts on the drama of last weekend. It started with Evan Cooper's resignation, which we've spent plenty of time talking about here, both on the Saturday morning edition and then to start this week off. We also need to get your thoughts on John Butler. But just first, I want your reaction to this situation as a whole. There's never a dull week in Nebraska, as much as you'd like there to be, so it always feels like there's some drama going on behind the scenes. And this week was no different. So I want to get your thoughts on just what this week was as a whole.
Yeah, I was totally out of the loop and didn't see the Evan Cooper news until like late Friday night when we got back to our hotel in Pittsburgh. If you'd asked me a week ago, which assistant coach would Nebraska least like to lose, I probably would have put Cooper second behind Tony White. Like, I think it hurts. I don't know that it hurts right away in 24. But I think there's the potential for a long-term effect here. And I think the reason was, like, and we'll get into this, I think, when we talk about Butler a little bit, Cooper, well, he's been with Matt Rule basically the entire way. So it's obvious, like, he was one of Rule's guys. I think he was uniquely good at identifying talent. I think he was a good recruiter. And those are two kind of intangibles that, you know, it's tough to just replace. Like you'll always be able to find the guys that fit in terms of scheme and X's and O's and what they know, and guys that can assimilate themselves and help you not miss a beat in the short-term future. It's more the long-term piece of it. Like Cooper's got, I mean, look at that DB room. He's recruited a lot of guys that are on the roster. And it's not going to probably make a big difference for this year, but you have to wonder at least about the future after that, because, these players, and rightly so, a lot of them are committing because of the position coach.
We're talking to Brandon Vogel, so let's go to John Butler. It's official. He's hired. Talk about that room first, and with him coming in, it kind of describe the job he has. Do you think it's a hard job for what he's coming into, or do you think it's kind of nice right now?
I think it's a pretty good situation. I mean, you've got a defense that overall returns a lot of production. I think a couple of the biggest questions, which they're not huge in the grand scheme of things, but within the context of Nebraska's defense, are probably in that secondary, namely cornerback opposite Tommy Hill. Got to find a guy there and then figure out how, what your kind of maybe second wave is, assuming all your starters are healthy and remain mostly healthy. So you've got a young room. So that's a little bit of a challenge. That said, I think one of the advantages of hiring a guy like Butler, who has almost 30 seasons as a football coach, is you feel pretty good about his ability to step into the situation later than anybody. You don't want to make a coaching change at this point. You do it because you have to. He'll be able to pick up the schemes and do what Tony White wants to do. In terms of building the relationship with the guys in the room, I think that's the other key piece of this. And I think he'll be okay there too. Let's not forget that Butler stepped into Penn State in 2012. You won't find kind of a more difficult overall situation than what Penn State was facing that first Bill O'Brien year. And he did that. He left a special teams coordinator job at South Carolina to do that. So it's one of those things where I think getting a veteran presence helps you most immediately for 2024. You're not trying to teach somebody the ropes or start a new coach out. Well, maybe they haven't had quite the experience that somebody like Butler has.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. Check out his work, counterread.com. And Vogel, as we talk John, I did it again, Will. That's another one in the swear jar. So we talk John Butler here. I want to get your thoughts on, before we look specifically at 2024, I kind of want to zoom out, because one of the things that was discussed right when the hire was made, one of the reasons he gave for leaving the Bills is he wanted to give himself a shot at a coordinator position. And with that in mind, the thought that maybe this is a guy that's going to be running your defense as soon as Tony White were to leave, which maybe that's what Cooper would have been in line to do as well, should he have not resigned last Friday. Do you think that is a net positive for Rule, I guess, to get that lined up now? Or do you think that's a little too far-sighted, understanding that defensive back is probably the position of the greatest concern on your defense next year, not knowing what opposite corner is going to look like, needing some guys that are going to need to get some, I guess, consistency when you look at a guy in Malcolm Hartzog and a guy that was coming off of injury last year in Marquise Buford? Stability and a lack of stability might not be a great thing for them. You have to do what you have to do, and John Butler is very much renowned as a defensive backs coach, but it's a tough place to put him in, especially considering it might just be a one-year stop for him in the defensive back room before he makes a move to defensive coordinator, assuming that is the plan for Matt Rule.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a benefit that he is somebody who you could look at his career and where he's been and what he's done and say, if Tony White leaves at the end of this season, which we presume Nebraska's defense will be good again and he'll have opportunities again, that's a natural person who could be in the running for that position. I thought Evan Cooper would have been in the running for that position prior to his departure, and that would have been that would have been a pretty significant step up the ladder for Cooper. Not as much for Butler. So I think that's a benefit. I think again, it's at this point, the news is still relatively fresh. We're all kind of trying to process it. And I haven't gone back and dug into how Butler was as a recruiter at his college stops. He's been in the NFL for the past 6 seasons. College football recruiting is totally different than the last time he did it, I think at Penn State, or If he had, a stop after that, I think that's a legitimate question. But, there's a lot of football programs in the country where your coordinators are probably not some of your best recruiters. So that's interesting too, if we consider him as a candidate for the defense coordinator job, should Nebraska have an opening soon. Maybe that's less of a concern. I would think it actually probably would be. Than if he were to remain the secondary coach. And maybe he's a great recruiter, and I just haven't had the opportunity to look at it yet. It's just when you're that far away from the college game for a while and so much changes, I think it's a fair question to ask.
Hey, you want to go?
Yeah, I just want to get to the question that we were asked back in segment 1, which is, does this hire specifically with Butler coming in, does it change your expectations for the defense as a whole? Does it change your expectations for the secondary in 2024 in terms of what a good season looks like for them, understanding that this has been a wrench thrown into the plans of the defense, and this has been an unforeseen change for the guys that are in that room that are looking for stability? They've encountered a lot of change in the past couple of years, some of those older guys especially.
Yeah, it doesn't change my expectation for 2024. Now, I think if you were to get to the end of the season and you saw, a handful of defections from that room, that would tell you a little bit like, yeah, a lot of these guys were here for Cooper potentially. Who knows? There's a lot of football, all the football at this point in 2024 to be played before we get to any of those things. But for the season ahead, I think this hire does a good job of keeping Nebraska on track. It's relatively low. I don't want to say low maintenance or low risk, but something like that. Like, this is a guy who's coached a lot of football. Rule obviously trusts him. You expect him to come in and kind of pick up. And oh, by the way, Nebraska has a veteran secondary. So I think in terms of the relationship part of it, which is important, we talked a little bit about, he's got a bunch of guys there. Tommy Hill, Deshaun Singleton, Malcolm Hartzog eventually. Gifford will be there, I believe, that want to be in the NFL. So bringing in a guy who's coaching the Buffalo Bills last year, probably, gets things started off at least a half step in the right direction right out of the gates. So it's kind of beyond this year where some of that other stuff that we just don't know yet potentially comes into play for me.
We're talking to Brandon Vogel. Brandon, I wanted to ask you about Mike Gundy. I'm sure you saw his comments yesterday. Really what I want to ask is, he said he's not going to be suspending or really any real punishment to him. Do you think that could be a trend here in college football as years go on with NIL and all that stuff, trying to protect the player from, what he's earning?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it becomes a trend, because Gundy, as traditional as he is in some regards, is pretty untraditional when it comes to coaches. Like, I still think that the baseline would be, if that situation unfolds someplace else, that player is probably gonna have to sit for a little bit. I'll at least give Gundy credit for this. And I didn't agree with a lot of the justifying he tried to do with this. I'll at least give him credit for this. He's here because that was part of the accountability piece of it. And if you think about it, what's easier, to get a DUI and then not go to media days when you should have been, or to get there and deal with the questions for a little bit? So I'll at least give him credit for that. And I'll give him credit for saying, well, this is what I'm going to do. Even if I think, some sort of suspension was probably merited in this instance. So when it comes to Gundy, I have a hard time thinking of him as a trendsetter, because he's just so unlike so many other coaches that we see today, which it's a good thing at times and a bad thing at times.
Brandon, we're up against it here. Can we keep you for 2 minutes on the side to tell us about both your work on the Common Fan podcast and Counter Read?
Sure. All
right, more with Brandon Vogel coming your way after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
A little bit of overtime here with Brandon Vogel. Counter Read, counterread.com is where you read him, and we thank Brandon for hanging on with us for another segment. And Brandon, before we get to both your work on Counter Read and on the Common Fan podcast, which we spent a little bit of time about talking about that new episode with Mike Riley a little bit earlier in the week, I want to get your thoughts of all the media day drama, if you will, we've seen this week. You had Gundy, you had just the Colorado clown show, if I can call it that. I think I will, that we saw yesterday. You had Big 12 Media Days with multiple misspellings, unable to spell both Cincinnati and Fort Worth. We also had Pac-12 Media Days after dark, where they had an open bar and said, if anyone has the right to drink, it's the Pac-12. And then you had the Mountain West, where Boise State had a running back who was under the age of 21. The media days were being held at a 21 and over only casino, so he had to do a separate media session by himself at a different location. Of all the weirdness, what do you think has stolen the headlines most in your eyes?
What caught my attention the most was the weird Pac-12 with two teams media days. I thought it was a genius idea of like, yep, we're here, and we're going to put it on the day, because we only need one day, between the Big 12 and the Mountain West. So you're going to get a lot of reporters there. So from a PR perspective, I think it was a success. I also appreciated kind of the deadpan humor of, if anybody's earned a drink, it's us. So yeah, we're moving into talking season. It's kind of fun to get some of these out first. You know, the SEC continually is kind of like the biggest and brashest. And then by the time you get to Big Ten, it's fairly like a buttoned up affair. I've been there a lot of times. So I'm expecting not to get a ton of fireworks from the Big Ten, but that's just kind of business as usual over there.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. And Brandon, let us know about the new episode of the Common Fan Podcast. You've been working on it with the guys over there. You had a guy we're going to have on this show later in the show, Brian Christopherson, on this week to talk about Mike Riley, his era. Tell us a little bit about that show and what you think we can learn now with the benefit of hindsight looking back at the Mike Riley era.
Yeah, so Brian was good enough to join us. Brian does great work for 247 for a long time and for the Lincoln Journal-Star before that. And, you know, the Riley discussion I found was one of my favorites that we've done. So the series, for those who may be just catching it for the first time, looks back at each of the coaching hires Nebraska has made since Tom Osborne, so starting with Solich. And, you know, the Riley one was like, didn't make a ton of sense at the outset. I think everybody was surprised at the end of it, like, because Frost was doing what he was doing at UCF. I think everybody was kind of like, yeah, you gotta take your swing at Frost. But like, the frame for this episode was Riley the biggest miss of these coaching hires Nebraska has made since Osborne. And I said on the episode, and I've been a little bit surprised. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but a lot of the feedback we've gotten on Twitter, people are like, no, Frost was the biggest miss. And I think, like, if you objectively step back and look at it, like the coach who just gone 13-0 with UCF, having the record he did at Nebraska, that's like a massive upset. It's a outcome nobody even really considered at the time he was hired. So that episode comes next week. So if you want to make sure to catch that and catch up on the ones that you may have missed, if you have, you can just search for Common Fan Podcast wherever you get that on your favorite podcast purveyor, and get caught up, because the Frost episode's quite good as well.
I think you could make the argument with Riley, just to bring it back there for a little bit. One of the quotes from the podcast that I liked was that Mike Riley made a career out of turning chuck roast into ribeye. And you could make an argument that knowing that's what his career bread and butter was, it wasn't what Nebraska needed at the time following the Bo Pelini tenure. And stylistically, from a personality point of view, he was the antithesis to Bo, and it kind of made sense in that way. But from what Nebraska needed in a coaching standpoint to take what Bo had and elevate it a little bit more, I can see where you think that would work, but it really doesn't make sense now with the benefit of hindsight seeing how it turned out. Yeah,
I mean, everyone hoped that sort of ribeye multiplier would be in play. The difference is like at Nebraska, you know, despite its fortunes over the past 20 years, like, you start with ribeye. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, you know, are you trying to make it a prime ribeye? Well, you know, and obviously didn't work out that way. 3 years was pretty short. It's interesting to consider, like, if the Frost train isn't steaming down the tracks in 2017, does 1-4-8 season mean the end for Riley? We'll never know, I guess, but would have been interesting. But, you know, by the point we got to November of that year, like, everyone knew that Frost was going to go somewhere. And if you were a Nebraska fan, it really better be Nebraska. And to Bill Moose's credit, he got that done.
Brandon Vogel with us here. And Brandon, as we get you out, let us know what's coming up from you, what's coming up from Counter Read and counterread.com.
Yeah, so we'll have some, we're still a little bit a ways from Media Days before we jump into that. But I'm interested to look at a little bit more with Butler now that the hire is official. I plan to do that next week. My colleague who runs Counter Read with me, Erin Sorensen, is in Italy right now. So we'll see if she rounds up any Husker stories from Italy. But we got that. We got a kind of an Olympic look ahead too, featuring some Husker athletes. So plenty of good stuff to come, even though we're in the kind of coldest, even though it's the hottest outside, kind of the coldest time in college football calendar.
And Brandon, how do people get signed up?
Yep, just head to counterread.com. You'll be able to check out a couple of our free pieces there. If you become a free subscriber, that gets you 7 days, gets you access to all of our subscriber exclusive newsletters. And then if you want to become a subscriber after that, that means you get two exclusive newsletters a week and access to all the other stuff that we do each week too.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. Brandon, appreciate your time here on a Thursday, and we'll chat with you on Saturday morning, all right?
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
There he is, Brandon Vogel with us here, a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And as we wrap up the hour, let's quickly let you know about the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame class. We'll also get thoughts on Nebraska basketball's non-conference schedule here after the break. We'll also get back into that in hour 2 because I want to get Will's take on that. Will's been a big Husker basketball guy for pretty much your entire life. And I'll get your thoughts on what is a bit of another cupcake non-conference schedule. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, the 6 former Huskers inducted, set to be, I should say, into the 2024 Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. You have Kevin Leitner, safety Tyrone Bird, linebacker Terrell Farley, defensive end Chris Kelsey, defensive tackle Jared Crick, who actually got a mention on this show just a couple of days ago, as well as one of everybody's favorites, running back Rex Burkhead, Sexy Rexy, set to be inducted into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. That will occur on September 13th, the Friday night, ahead of Nebraska's home game against Northern Iowa. So we're looking forward to that. Might try to get an appearance from a couple of those guys. We've had Chris Kelsey on this show before. We've also had Rex Burkhead on this show before. And I think following the draft way back when, we have Jared Crick somewhere in our archives. We're going to try to reach out to a couple of these guys and see if we can get them on the show ahead of their induction into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. One more to note, Monty Johnson was inducted from the Legends category, and then the state college representative in the class is Mike Miller, All-American running back at the University of Nebraska Kearney back in the early 2000s. So there's your Nebraska Football Hall of Fame class for 2024. Super excited for those guys. Some of my favorites to watch with Jared Crick. Spent some time with the Broncos. You always love that. And then Rex Burkhead, fantastic Nebraska career, fantastic NFL career. Just awesome to see him get inducted. It's weird to start seeing people from my era of growing up watching Husker football start to get inducted into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. That'll do it for us here. One more segment in hour 1 of Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here in hour 1, it's Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager. Elijah Herbel joined here in studio by Will Wilson, who's in for Chris Schmidt this week, as we've gotten into plenty this hour, an extended sit-down with Brandon Vogel, counterread.com. He'll be back with us on a Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio as well. Plenty coming your way here in hour 2, as well as we'll get Brian Christopherson on the horn to discuss his thoughts. John Butler officially being named Nebraska defensive backs coach, replacing Evan Cooper. Also get some Burke's Best Bets with Danny Burke, one of our favorite segments of the week. A slow sports weekend that doesn't stop the sports gambling. So
never does.
We'll get into that with him. We'll also get into the idea of using a sports wager as a potential business money-making opportunity, as we saw with the local company and their NIL deal with Ty Robinson. I shouldn't say as we saw, as my theory would indicate, and I want to know if that's legal and or acceptable in the eyes of Danny Burke. It's a hedge bet, but I'm not sure if a business hedge bet like that is legal in the eyes of the government or the IRS. I don't know. Regardless, let's quickly turn our attention here to Husker basketball, as they've announced the 2024-2025 non-conference schedule, including the likes of Grand Valley State, Texas Rio Grande Valley, Bethune-Cookman, Fairleigh Dickinson, St. Mary's, Creighton, South Dakota, North Florida, Southern, and then a decent schedule at the Diamond Head Classic out in Honolulu, where Nebraska, if we're being honest, is probably the most fearsome team on the schedule. So I don't think it's a stretch for me to call it a cupcake schedule, right, Will, for the non-conference?
Yeah, I mean, even if you do, I think it's pretty accurate. I will say though, you know that Hawaii Classic, you think we're the what word did you use?
Probably the most fearsome.
Yeah, I guess. Don't put Hawaii past you. I mean, they're a bunch of homer and jerks up there. We all remember what happened last time. That was awful. The refs loved them.
But in terms of
Hawaii,
the field this year, Charlotte, the College of Charleston, Loyola of Chicago, Murray State, Oakland, and then Oregon State.
Yeah,
along with Nebraska.
I don't know much about those teams right now.
That's what I'm saying. College basketball is a little different than college football in that some teams can surprise you in any given year. But I don't know. I like Nebraska's chances against a lot of those teams.
Yeah, I do too. And yeah, the non-con it's not very impressive, but I think we just need to get used to it.
And I see this two ways. The first being with what you're going to have in the conference slate. You don't need to go schedule a crazy non-conference. Just go take care of business in conference play and let the rest take care of itself. And if you can take care of business in the Big Ten, you'd assume you can take care of business against these teams you have scheduled. Not to mention the fact that you have a roster that has a lot of new pieces, a lot of new faces. It's going to need to do some gelling in the beginning of the year, and it's always better for a team to be gelling when you're winning. But on the flip side of things, like, what are your aspirations for your season and for your program?
Yeah.
In order to go beat the best, you have to test yourself against the best, and you have to go learn from the best. And you're going to get a chance to do that in the Big Ten, but don't you want a chance to do that maybe a little bit earlier in the season so you're not getting into Big Ten play and realizing, other teams have been more battle-tested than us, and now we have a lot of catching up to do?
I mean, listen, Hoiberg has done this every year. This is his thing. Again, I think this is something we have to get used to. You just hope quad 1 and 2 things doesn't come back to bite you. It didn't last year. I guess you had K-State, and I think was that maybe in Creighton. Obviously, we got blown out.
Oregon State up in Sioux Falls.
But they were awful.
That's true.
If the Big Ten holds up their end of the bargain, the non-con really shouldn't matter.
That's true.
Get used to it. This is what Hoiberg does.
So Will Wilson with us here. He's joining us all week long in place of Chris Schmidt on Hail Varsity Radio. We'll get Brian Christopherson's thoughts on a busy week for Husker football, the addition of Coach Butler to the Husker football coaching staff. That's after the break right here on Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back in here to Hour 2 of Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Elijah Herbel, joined here in the studio by Will Wilson. You hear him every single morning for our local listeners on KFOR, our home station. The morning hookup, 10 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday with his co-host, Bill Hooks. You can also find him on Twitter at Willie on the Radio. Really can't thank Will enough for his time stepping in here and filling in for Chris Schmidt as Schmidt's getting some much-needed time off. So we open up Hour 2 here. Welcome Brian Christopherson to the show. Husker 24/7 is where you follow his work. And Brian, it's good to get caught up with you here on a Thursday. It hasn't quite been the slow week that everyone was expecting, and a lot of people expect through mid-July. How are you doing? You appreciating the time of maybe having a little bit more work?
Yeah, I don't mind it. It always works that way. When you think you can just lay low and go golfing, there's something happening. So last week I was up in Minnesota at our family cabin, picking up the finer points of pickleball about the time Evan Cooper's resignation went public. So that's how it usually works. Is like about when you're on the pickleball court trying to protect the kitchen, some news like that happens.
So what's the first response whenever do you crack a beer? Do you just get right back to the pickleball? What's the first reaction when news such as that breaks?
We had guys on it. Fortunately, the fellows back home were tracking it. We're way more aware of it than I was, honestly, that week. So they said, we got it. All's well. So, yeah, I went back to playing pickleball and going to a Mexican restaurant down the country road. So that's how I handled it.
Where at in Minnesota, Brian?
Pretty close to Detroit Lakes, which is Adam Thielen country. He's probably the pride of Detroit Lakes. Also the home of We Fest, which is a big country music festival that happens in July, August. Never been, but they were touting Eric Church as being one of the headliners, so I guess they do all right. So yeah, it's around that area. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, which is where I like to be when I'm not tracking Husker football recruits or something.
Very good.
Well, I was a big reaction there. What was that about?
Ryan walked in, but no, I was in Bemidji a couple weeks ago. Brian, beautiful weather up there.
Oh yeah. It was like in the 70s last week up there. It was. I was enjoying it. I was wearing long sleeves on the golf course one of the days. So it makes me realize how much I prefer the fall to every other season beyond football.
We were discussing earlier this week on the show, and I think now you have a positive review of Minnesota. We were discussing whether or not Minnesota needs to be a part of the 50 states because they're kind of weird up there. They called Duck, Duck, Goose, as we learned this week on the show, Duck, Duck, Gray Duck instead of Duck, Duck, Goose, which seems wrong to me. They hold an NFL team, which despite being up there in winning percentage, has 0 Super Bowls. They're the home of currently PJ Fleck. Just a lot of factors that make you go, do they really need to be a part of this great country? But then you lay some of this stuff out, the beautiful weather, the lakes, the country fest, and maybe you're right.
That's why they're a little strange up there. It's because there are places in Minnesota outside of like Minneapolis, St. Paul, where you can really kind of stretch out and you're kind of away from the rest of society. And so you form your own oddball opinions when you're out there trying to catch a bass. So I think that's a lot of what happens. I won't tolerate that Viking slander much more, but it is accurate what you said. So I guess I'll leave it there.
I actually watched like a 7-part documentary last year on the entire history of the Minnesota Vikings. I'll give credit. Secret Base on YouTube did a great series where they broke down every single decade of the Vikings. And while I was watching the documentary, I actually felt a little bit bad for Vikings fans. Not completely bad, because as a Broncos fan, I've had to see the turmoil of the past decade since the Super Bowl, so I've experienced a boatload of pain, but like it was a hard watch.
Yeah, it can be hard. I do always kind of counter that by telling people to be a Vikings fan can be fulfilling in a way, because generally, as you laid out in your statistic, they're a solid franchise. Like they're always kind of in the playoff hunt, or they're in the playoffs. And so, like if you like, I was getting in an argument with a Bears fan about this a few months ago. I was like, go check how many playoff appearances the Vikings have compared to the Bears and get back to me. Like I've had more falls of fulfillment where we're like at least in the conversation than some other teams, but it does end up in heartbreak, and you just kind of get used to that.
It's Brian Christopherson with us here. Husker 24/7 is where you find his work. Find him on Twitter at Husker. Wait, I got to get this right here. Husker 24/7 BC. That's where you find him on Twitter. So we really appreciate BC hopping on the show with us today. And Brian, as we shift to the news of the week and really the news of the day, Nebraska makes the hire of Coach John Butler official, somewhat of a formality at this point. We spent plenty of the week talking about Coach Butler, and I want to get your thoughts on the hire first in terms of the type of experience he brings to the role, and B, what some of his challenges are going to be as he steps into this role late with that defensive backroom as it currently stands.
Well, when you're in a pinch, as you sort of are when you're hiring a position coach in late June, early July, as Matt Rule was, you'd be hard-pressed to do better as far as the initial resume glance, right? I mean, like whenever an assistant coach is hired around here, we always get on a Google box and we see, okay, what's this guy have in his background? In this case, John Butler has a lot more than some of the coaches that have been hired over the years. So it's easy to be like, okay, that guy was in line to maybe be the Bills defensive coordinator this past season. He's been the DC at Penn State before. He's been a special teams coordinator, linebackers coach with the Texans. All that stuff, you add it up and you're like, okay, I'll take a guy like that with a short runway over a lot of possible options. So it looks like a good hire on the surface. In the same sentence, I would say I'm not underplaying the loss of Evan Cooper at all. I think he was a great evaluator that was really trusted on this staff as far as the recruiting process goes. And so that is a hole you're going to have to fill, and I'm sure Matt Rule, he's usually confident they can find ways to do that. but I'm not going to pretend as though it wasn't a pretty significant headline when when that announcement was made.
We're talking to Brian Christopherson. Brian, as we get through a few more months, looking at that defensive backs room, who's a guy or maybe a couple guys where you could see Butler saying, wow, I'm very lucky I have this guy in my room. Who do you think is a guy that could surprise him in terms of talent coming up?
Yeah, first off, it won't surprise him, but the guys that he's going to be like, okay, this is nice for what I'm walking into is Gifford. Marquise Buford is like that. I mean, Buford suffered an injury like his first play of spring ball as a true freshman with the Pats staff and still worked his way onto the field by the fall after a serious injury, and then he impressed this staff last year. And so he's just one of those like high football IQ guys. I feel like Deshaun Singleton's the one a lot of people are forgetting about. And I thought he was one of Nebraska's best defenders in the first month of the season. It's just a matter of can he catch his stride right away after what was kind of a significant injury. And then obviously Tommy Hill, we know, has a high ceiling. It's just about consistency with him. So those are the guys where you say, okay, this is nice. I'm new here, but I've got like 4 or 5 guys, Hartsogs in that mix, where it's like they've played some football. They're going to be leading voices in the room and help me through this process a bit. As much as a 51-year-old coach who's been around the block needs that. And then, after that, okay, you're asking for like a surprise. Like Jeremiah Charles, I think, is one of those guys that, he's going to get on the field and be like, this guy's a freak athlete. Now, can he put it all together enough to potentially win a job or be on the 2 deep? He has to prove that. But he's got a few guys like that. And it's a credit to Evan Cooper and how he's kind of stacked that room. Mario Buford's another name. I think Caleb Benning, from a football family and obviously with the high IQ for the game is a guy you can't count out. So what's always interesting to me, guys, about the secondary is it is a spot on the field where sometimes a true freshman can pop in and, make a little noise. And so you have to at least leave open that possibility that one of the newer guys could at least be on the 2 deep and factoring in somehow.
Brian Christopherson with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Brian, I want to specifically focus in on the corner spots here for just a second, as it's turned into a bit of a deep dive on the secondary. With Tommy Hill's a guy that through his college career has bounced around from Arizona State to Nebraska, from defense to offense and back to defense. It just seemed like so many coaches saw the athletic potential but couldn't quite unlock it. Evan Cooper was the guy that unlocked it. So on one side, that's a guy that I think a lot of Husker fans have put in pin as being an impact performer on defense, but I think the loss of Evan Cooper concerns me a little bit. I want to get your thoughts there, but I also want to get your thoughts on that opposite corner spot, because across the entire defense, that spot opposite Tommy Hill might be the biggest question mark on the defense. With Bly Hill, the injury concern, he performed well and impressed, but you don't know what his health's going to be. It's a boatload of younger guys beneath him on the depth chart, at least how it stands right now. You also have the addition of Sire Wright. A lot of question marks that opposite corner spot. How do you feel about the cornerbacks now that they have a new position coach coming in?
Yeah, first off with Tommy, he's probably got, if you were to say, okay, who are like the top 3 or 4 guys, ceiling-wise, like who's the highest off the floor, Tommy's one of those guys. I don't know I think it's starting to get leaked, like what the rankings are in the EA Sports game. Not that we have to go off a video game for our analysis, but, people are having fun with it. I think Tommy Hill will be up there as one of the higher-rated Huskers, and he probably should be. He's got NFL-type talent, but the key with him is, can he take November, what his November was, and just make that a constant games 1 through 12? Because there have been ups and downs along the way. He did have some games, like even the year before, where he got thrown out there and he got beat a few times, and I think had to sort of deal with the mental part of playing that position and coming back from when you get toasted. And so we'll see how he relates, obviously, with the new coach. I do think he's got a personality where he can adapt pretty well. Like, he's really bought into Matt Rule and just what he's about. So if Matt Rule's like, this is our coach, this is who your guy is, you're going to listen to him, I think Tommy Hill's the type of guy who probably is going to jump for that and be fine. The other corner is really interesting. And Jeremiah Charles could be a guy. Sire Wright, you can't leave him out of this conversation at all, having, I think, started 12 games at USC. Anybody who's played for a program like that, you have to hope can come in and make a difference right away. I go back to a couple weeks ago. I asked Rules point blank how he feels about his corners 2 months from the season, and he said, we're going to be good. Like, I know we've got the guys. We there's some unproven guys, but he pointed out, like, last year, people wondered if Omar Brown was up to it. And there's always guys like that every season where people are sort of skeptical about, and he just feels like they've got some answers there. So they do have to prove it, though. If you say what's one possible hole on this defense, I think most people first off would say it's that one corner spot. Who's there? How much can he lock it down? And, whatever we have to say about Colorado, they are going to put some dudes out there and a quarterback who can sling it in week 2. So you've got to have somebody with sort of that tough inner strength, to play in a game like that, who's going to have to step up right away.
That dog is what you're saying?
That dog, yeah, he's got to have that dog in him. I think that's what I'm not allowed to really say that at my age, but you kind of led me into it, so I feel like it's acceptable.
It was the perfect word for the moment.
Yes. Got that dog in him.
Brian, speaking of college football 25, this might be a tough question just to throw at you, but you were mentioning player ratings. Who should be the highest rated player on this Nebraska football team?
Ooh.
Nash Hutmaker probably, or Gifford. Gifford just does so much, and he's like I know a video game probably doesn't want to rate the extra effects a guy has on your roster or your defense beyond just his speed and all that capabilities, but Isaac Gifford has all that other stuff, sort of that kind of mentality where when he's in the interview room, it's a little nervous to ask him a question. He's kind of quick with his answers, and you're like, man, this guy's got some bite to him. He's kind of got that. So I would put Gifford up there just for what he means to the whole unit. But Nash, I think last year proved more so than anybody that he can be an every down guy who's just a problem for everybody in this league. And so I would probably put Nash up there.
As you talked about Isaac and his personality, I want to quickly get your thoughts, and we'll get you out on this. We got about 90 seconds left here. Isaac Gifford is a guy that's going to Big Ten Media Days, along with Ty Robinson and Ben Scott, all three guys that just strike you in the way they speak as tough, hard-nosed football players. They don't maybe talk big, but they're going to let their actions speak louder than their words. What do you make of those three selections for Big Ten Media Days and how they represent Nebraska?
It's in a group of guys who it's bring these three and don't overthink it. Basically, you're talking about the three guys who all probably in their own way could have considered walking away from the college game, but had some unfinished business here. So I think they're kind of the perfect representation of how this program and a lot of the guys on the roster are feeling we see the potential, but we got to go get it now. And I came back for one more year to go get it. And so to have those guys on the platform talking about it, those guys are the type who aren't going to say anything stupid. They'll keep it in bounds the way you want it. But they've also earned the right to go. Ben Scott, he's as valuable as anybody on this roster. We're doing our most indispensable Huskers list, and I don't think it'll shock anybody that our top three guys are those guys. So it makes all the sense in the world to me. I guess Ty wasn't. He was fourth or fifth. But, those guys are so critical to this whole operation. And, when I saw the names, I was like, yeah, why not? I couldn't think of anybody that's better than those three.
Brian Christopherson with us here. Find his work, Husker247, and find him on Twitter at Husker247BC. Brian, appreciate the time, and have yourself a lovely rest of your Thursday, all right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Thursday here on Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. I'm going to edit that out. We're going to act like I never said Wednesday, so for those of you in the podcast version, we'll see if I'm able to do that or not. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through this Thursday edition. We just had a fantastic sit-down with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. A lot of great insight on that defensive back room, his thoughts also on the state of Minnesota. So if you miss anything from Brian Christopherson, it's awesome. You can check it out in podcast form. It should be posted up shortly following the conclusion of the show today. Again, it's Will Wilson sitting in with us all week long here on Hail Varsity Radio. We really appreciate having you, Will. I'll give you the plug one more time. Check out his work with The Morning Hookup, his co-host Bill Hooks every single morning here on our home station in Lincoln. So for our local listeners, you can check it out on KFOR 10 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Across the state, you can check them out. The Morning Hookup, look them up on YouTube, and you can hop in their live stream that way. So Will, we really appreciate you, and I do encourage everyone to go check out your work with Bill Hooks. It's great work, and
thank you.
It's kind of the perfect transition for the listeners out there. Yeah, Hurrdat Sports Radio in the morning. That ends right as Bill and Will get on the air. So you can take it from Hurrdat Sports Radio online straight into Will Wilson and Bill Hooks with The Morning Hookup from 10 to 11. And then obviously check out Hail Varsity Radio in the afternoons from 4 to 6. So we kind of have your day bookended in that way. We got morning drive, start your day at work, end your day, drive back home. We got everything you need. So there's my little 2-minute plug.
Thank you so much
for everything.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's get back into sports here, as I don't want to toot our own horn too much, but I do think we do pretty good work here with our work, both with Hurrdat and with KFOR. I do want to dive back into Media Days just briefly here, as we had some bold comments from Shedeur Sanders, which we'll get to, but I want to start where we ended with Brian Christopherson and quickly discuss the candidates, or I shouldn't say the candidates, the selections for Nebraska to take off to Media Days this year. It's Ben Scott, the center, Ty Robinson, longtime defensive lineman, as well as Isaac Gifford, the fifth year out of Lincoln Southeast. I think it's really three guys that, in my eyes, represent what Matt Rule wants this program to be. Guys that let their actions speak louder than their words. They're tough, hard-nosed football players. They don't have to tell you how tough they are. They play tough. And three guys that I think really dedicate themselves to the grind, dedicate themselves to the development side of things, and have become much better football players in the 18 months since Matt Rule has stepped on campus. I think it's three selections that just make sense. And in terms of what type of team Matt Rule wants to have, he wants to have 22 guys that play like these three. That's why I think they're your three selections this year.
Yeah. And
BC laid out as being they're indispensable. I agree with that. From a center spot on offense, I'm going to take you through all three players. Ben Scott is the guy that sets the protections for the offensive line, is that man in the middle, the guy that kind of has to know what everyone is doing on any given play with the offensive line. You're the guy that's the presumptive leader. And you can have leaders in other spots in the offensive line, but the center, the man in the middle, is the guy that's calling protections, calling signals both ways. He's laying out the protections. He knows the job of everybody. He's usually that leader for you. So I think that's a fantastic selection, because not only is he the leader of your offensive line, which is a position group that Matt Rule wants to lead this football team, he's also a guy that does it in the right way. Actions louder than words. He's not going to tell you how hard he's working. He's just going to put his nose down and work, and he's quietly one of the toughest guys on the field. Defensively, you look at Ty Robinson. We all know his impact, both stopping the run, getting after the quarterback, and you would also hope eating up some double teams to allow some other guys, and he's not going to complain about that double team work that he's going to be getting this upcoming season. It's part of the job that comes of being a high-level defensive lineman. Not going to complain about it, going to keep on putting his nose down, going to keep on working. That's who he is. He's been doing it for years now. I think that's a very, very fitting selection for Big Ten Media Days. And then Isaac Gifford, I mean, you saw some of his behind-the-scenes stuff with the documentaries Nebraska's been releasing, with their work last fall, the Chasing Three, the leadership qualities that he's developed to stand out and be a leader on that defense. He's a little bit more rah-rah than these other guys, but he still leads with his actions more than his words. He's a guy that from what you see from the outside and what you hear from the coaches, is a guy that is the hardest worker in that room. The guy that shows the other guys what it means to be a Husker through how he plays. And he's a guy that knows what it means to be a Husker. With his family lineage, Luke being before him, being a Lincoln kid, growing up a Husker fan, seeing some of those bow teams that I think had a black shirt mentality about them. He's seen what it means to be a Husker, what it means to be a black shirt. He knows it probably better than anyone on that team, and I think it's another fitting selection. Just three guys that I think make a whole lot of sense of being the three guys you're sending to the Media Days, because I think they truly embody what Matt Rule wants all 22 of his starters to be.
Is that in Indy again?
It's going to be in Indianapolis.
Is it always in Indy?
I think they have permanently made the flip to Indianapolis every single year.
Okay. Very good.
So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on what those selections are, what they mean. I'm excited to hear from them. We're going to try to sit down with all three of them. Schmitty's going to be on the road, I guess on the plane, out to Indianapolis here in a week and a half. So that's really sneaking up on us. So he's going to be heading out on Tuesday. He's going to be out there on Tuesday and Wednesday and then back on Thursday. So that's going to be his plan for Media Day. He's going to get the Husker side of things. We had Matt Rule last year, hoping for him again this year. All 3 Huskers and also some other national media members as well as other teams within the Big Ten. I think we want to have a focus on some of those West Coast teams coming in. Let us know what you want, though. If you, the listener at home, want to give Schmitty some thoughts, some interviews, some guys you want to hear from at Big Ten Media Days, let us know. Send him an email. Send us a tweet. Send me a tweet, whatever you want to do. We live to serve you, and those Big Ten Media Days can be a lot of fun. They're stressful, they're long days, but you get to talk to so many people throughout the conference and so many different voices that I think you get some really cool insight. So we're looking forward to that, and we're looking forward to hearing from those 3 Huskers. Where I turn our attention to now is, I called it earlier, it's a little bit harsh, but I call it the clown show that is the Colorado Buffaloes. Am I necessarily wrong there?
No.
No, and my problem with calling them the clown show that is the Colorado Buffaloes is that I do think, and this might be a hot take around here, people may disagree with me on this, I do think they are a team that when it's in between the white lines, whenever they're on the field, you see videos out of practice from them, I do think they put in work. I don't think they put in work like Matt Rule in Nebraska. I think it's 2 different styles, but I think they are guys that, with Deion at the helm, they're not all about flash. Off the field, they're about flash, they're about hype, they're about Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Louis Vuitton.
And rap concerts.
That
your teammates won't go to.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the culture is like over there, but I will say when you get them on the field, they have high-level position coaches. They have high-level coordinators. They have Coach Prime at the top, who love him or hate him, I think is a good football mind. I think whenever they're on the practice field, whenever they're on the field, I think they're a team that does put in work, and people are going to disagree with me on that. I'll let you disagree with me on that one. I think Deion is still kind of 1980s in his style in that, though off the field, he knows that what's going to get Colorado attention is that flash. I think he does understand that he needs some flash on the field in order to make his team what he wants it to be. But whenever they are on the field, I think he's going to coach those guys hard. I truly believe that, and people may disagree with me, but the clown show comes from off the field. All the drama we've had this offseason with guys entering the transfer portal and saying, I mean, they didn't even know my name. Shador hopping on Twitter, man, I didn't know who you were. Good riddance. Like, it's
crazy.
Craziness. And then the drama with all the team has to go support Shador in his rap career. Like, there is so much stuff off the field that feels like Colorado is going to fail. And you get comments like this from Shador Sanders at Big Ten Media Days, kind of asked about the pressure that comes along with being the face of this Colorado football team under Deion, and kind of some of the own making of the show that is Colorado, and he was asked if it puts any more pressure onto him.
Do you have an obligation to perform at a different level?
It's been that since day one. I remember first media day when I was in HBCU, I said, well, we won't lose a game. I'm undefeated in the SWAC, so I already know what the expectation comes with. I know we're everybody's Super Bowl, so I'm really just, I always stay level-headed, stay grounded, because I would never want to be that guy, look back, and not being able to take advantage of the moment that we have right now.
A lot to dissect there. Is there not a lot to dissect there? One of the things that really stands out to me is that he said, always level-headed, always grounded. Really?
Yeah. No.
Really?
Not accurate.
Okay. I don't think I need to elaborate more on just how crazy I think that is to say.
Level-headed? He's got the biggest head in college football. Not physically. Emotionally.
Yeah. That's crazy. Him saying, we know we're everybody's Super Bowl?
Yeah, let's touch on that.
Yeah, because that's been the quote that's really made waves. I did want to make light of the fact that Shador Sanders, with all his ego, said, I'm always level-headed, I'm always grounded. Okay, I'll let that lie. I'll let that lie. I disagree with you, man. Whatever you want to say with that. Okay, we're everybody's Super Bowl?
I think in order to say that, you have to be good. People always say in the NFL, when teams play the Chiefs, that's their Super Bowl. Or like when the Raiders play the Chiefs, that's the Raiders' Super Bowl, right? I think in order to say that, you have to be good. You have to be worth a crap.
I mean, I think there's 2 different sides of this. There's the fan base side, and there's the player side. Whenever you lose 8 games in a season, I don't think you can be anybody's Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
You're telling me that teams are looking at Colorado on their schedule and saying, man, if there's any game we're going to win this year, it's that one?
Yeah.
I think fans can say that. And I think it'd be fair to say that that Nebraska-Colorado game probably has more importance as it stands right now to Husker fans than any other game on the schedule. That's fair.
Yeah. And also, when you say a game is somebody's Super Bowl, the outcome has got to be awesome. Like, it's got to feel amazing.
It's got to feel important.
Important. You're not feeling important when you're beating a 4-8 team.
It would feel like Nebraska losing to Colorado would feel disastrous.
It would.
Nebraska beating Colorado this season would feel like taking care of business and kind of proof of concept of what Matt Rule is doing around here. It would not be Super Bowl. Because you look at the games on the schedule, like I think you could argue that Ohio State game, if Nebraska goes in 6-1 or 7-0, like a lot of folks around here expect them to be, that could be a Super Bowl type game for this Husker football team.
Mm-hmm.
Later in the season, whenever you're maybe fighting for bowl eligibility late and you have that 3-game stretch of USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, that could be a 3-game stretch where you could say any one of those could feel like a Super Bowl if it's fighting to get back to bowl eligibility or fighting to get back to 8 wins. Those are games that on the field will have an importance to the players, some pressure to the players. You think there's going to be pressure for Nebraska and Colorado? I think there might be a little added incentive for the team based on how last season went. That you go lose in bowls, you want to get back. But is it going to be the Super Bowl for this team? No.
Wow.
So you can say you're everybody's Super Bowl. I think it's fair to say a lot of fan bases are going to treat whenever you're playing Colorado as a big deal because everyone wants to beat Prime.
Yeah, right.
Love him or hate him, everyone wants to beat him.
I don't want to hear what anything else that guy has to say.
Well, it is that added little bit that Shedeur and Prime and that effect has on that game. That for the fan base, I can see where he's maybe coming from. That maybe there's an added importance that way.
Mm-hmm. Man,
from a team perspective, I don't think so.
I want to beat them so bad.
If you're everybody's Super Bowl, you're not going to midfield and flashing the watch at everybody, and that's no. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. I just thought it was funny. I had to get some of my thoughts out. We'll check in with Danny Burke, another edition of Burke's Best Bets. Look at the weekend betting slate. That's coming your way after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio. And as always, we are powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rocking through a Thursday here on Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Elijah Herbel, and Will Wilson. Excited to welcome the pride of Chicago, Danny Burke, to the show for another edition of Burke's Best Bets. And Danny, how are you doing? It's been a wet week in the Windy City by all accounts with Hurricane Burl, I think, coming up through. I saw there was some rain earlier in the week. Are you staying dry in the Windy City?
Yeah, it had been raining a few days. Today we got a little bit of a drizzle, but now we got all clear skies, bunch of sunshine. So, hey, no complaints here. How did you guys make out?
We did pretty well. There was some flooding last week within Lincoln, centralized flash flooding type stuff. Nothing too significant in terms of damage. We had that one storm come through, but it was a pretty mild week. We got a warm weekend coming up, though, so we're hunkering down, getting hydrated for that.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I know. We're getting to these dry parts of summer. Doesn't stop the rain, but maybe the sports conversation a little bit. So can't wait for NCAA football to come out so we can get, a little bit of excitement. I know you guys are going to be waiting for that as well. Should be a fun time.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. I think you already have it pre-ordered, Will, or no?
Not yet.
I think the pre-ordering is coming this weekend. I need to get that early access, and I will just lose so many hours in that game. One thing I did want to ask you about, Danny, Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on my couch watching TV. NASCAR Chicago. I didn't get a chance to go out. I wanted to. I wanted to see the Black Keys perform. I wanted to see NASCAR. Luckily, I avoided the rain. But did you get a chance to get out to Grant Park, that area, and go see the NASCAR? I was gonna say drive around in a circle, but they drove around in a circle. You get a chance to get out there? It's a pretty cool event.
No, I didn't make it this year. And last year I missed out, too. I was actually out in Las Vegas, and it was funny. When I was in Las Vegas, it was for my brother-in-law's bachelor party at the time, and it was that same weekend. I remember we ran into this group of guys, and we found out we had this common, pathway of both being from Chicago, and we explained why we were there, and then said, why are you guys here? And they're like, oh, we're avoiding the NASCAR race happening in downtown Chicago. And I'm like, that's a great idea, because it was just an absolute nightmare with the traffic that it caused, all the construction. And then last year, of course, speaking of the rain, they dealt with it. It was delayed, and everybody seemed to have complaints. But this year it seemed to have gone a lot better. I didn't partake in watching it at all. I was getting in from being out of town. But, no, by all accounts, it seemed like it went a little bit
more smoothly this year, but would certainly be a fun event to go to. I wouldn't go out of my way just because I'm not a big NASCAR guy. I haven't been to an event, but if someone happened to have an extra ticket, it would be a hard thing to pass up, I'm sure.
Danny Burke with us here, Burke's Best Bets. And Danny, as we transition to the weekend's sports betting action, we'll get to the MLB Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game here in just a minute, maybe some futures for the second half of the season as well. But I want to lock in on the games you got picked tonight. I'm seeing the Rockies at the Reds, and betting on anything with the Rockies is always a bit of a risk. And then you also have the A's and the Reds. What do you like tonight?
Yeah, so that Rockies-Reds game already happened. We did cash in with the run line with the Reds, so we came through with that at about plus 110. The other bet that I do have, Elijah, I'm riding with the Red Sox. That one, first pitch is in about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, and I'm back in Boston on the run line against the Oakland A's. Tanner Houck's taking the bump. He's been one of my favorite pitchers this year, and his numbers have been outstanding. He's really carried himself to being one of the top Cy Young candidates. Will he win it? No, realistically not. He struggled a little bit as of late, but this is a great bounce-back opportunity for him against an Oakland offense that is very much underperformed, like a lot of people expected. Against righties, they got an 86 weighted runs created plus and a 654 OPS. Hawks got a nice ERA and FIP of 268, and his ground ball percentage is very high at 55%. So obviously that's really what you want to see out of your pitchers as opposed to having high line drive rates, high fly ball rates. Hawk has done a great job at forcing these hitters into hitting the ball into play and it resulting to being ground balls. So against a weaker offense, he should thrive. And then conversely on the other side, Luis Medina there, he's taken a bump, and look, his numbers have not been stellar by any stretch of the imagination. 4.37 ERA, 5.47 on his xFIP. He's walking over 4.5 batters per 9 innings pitched, as a 1.54 whip, and his expected weighted on base average is at 322. Ideally, you want to keep that under 300, so he's fairly comfortably over that mark. Boston's been one of the hotter offenses the last month against righties. They're weighted runs created plus up to 123. ISO's at 192, and OPS is over 800. Wind's blowing out as well. This is a rubber match. I expect the Red Sox to win and cover. Got that at about minus 105. I know it's gotten a little bit more expensive, but I really like the Red Sox, and I think they put a beating down on Oakland.
We're talking to Danny Burke. Danny, it's good to talk to you again. Hope you had a good birthday. Happy late birthday. Let's go to Home Run Derby, man. It's exciting. Please don't say Pete Alonso, and please say my boy Bobby Witt.
Oh, sorry, guys. If Will's talking, I could barely hear him coming through. I heard something about the Home Run Derby, but you may have to repeat that to me. Sorry.
No, I was just, can you hear me? You got me okay, Danny?
Oh, there we go. Now I got you, buddy.
Well, I just said happy late birthday, and I don't want you to say Pete Alonso. I want you to say Bobby Witt.
Dude, okay, first of all, thank you. I appreciate the happy birthday. And secondly, that's funny you say that because that is the guy I was going to pick is Bobby Witt. I'm seeing him at about 6-1, maybe even a little bit better at several different outlets. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he participated in a home run derby either in high school or college, and I was watching some of the tape. And aside from that, not that that's going to matter that much, but it's nice to see that a player has that experience to some degree in dealing with that fatigue and really trying to rush and get as many homers as you can. And, yeah, obviously, like you said, I mean, Pete Alonso's the favorite, and you may just want to put a little bit of a security type of bet on him because he really takes pride in this contest. But if you're looking for your bang for your buck, I'm certainly going to be leaning toward Bobby Witt Jr. If not him, I see the appeal with Gunnar Henderson. I don't really like Ozuna. I think his swing's a little bit too long, too big of a guy. He's going to tire down. Garcia's got the power for sure, but I don't think he's going to have the endurance either. So I think it's Bobby Witt and Henderson are more of your legit picks. And then, again, if you really want to cover your traces, the safe bet obviously is always going to be Pete Alonso. But otherwise, outside of him, I like those two batters.
Danny, before we get you out of here, you touching the Euros and the Copa America finals on Sunday. I know you're not a big soccer guy, but these are some big games.
Oddly enough, it's been on the TV a little bit more so. But you're gonna. So what is it? Is Argentina just beat Canada, right, for Copa America? Who are they facing off against?
They're going to face Colombia, who beat Uruguay. Uruguay, though, did get some shots in after the game as some fans went up into the crowd and started fighting some Colombian fans.
Yeah, I know. It's like they're replicating the Malice at the Palace. You almost got to respect that intensity a little bit. Hard to go against Argentina, so I'll put my faith with them. And then the Euros, what do you got? We got England, and then who else is going against them? Spain. Ooh, man, that's tough. I kind of want to lean England. Am I wrong for going in that direction? Does that seem a little recency bias? I mean, it's both recency bias during the championship, but I was looking at the highlights for England, and they're looking pretty good. But clearly, as people can tell, I'm not a big soccer guy, so I'm just shooting in the dark here.
Well, here's the question. England's been a little bit cursed in international tournaments. They haven't won one in a long time, I think dating back to the late 60s. But they've had some magic this year. As much as people don't like their manager, they've had late magic, late goals, and they've gotten it done. Spain, though, also a very good team in their own right.
Yeah, so you're probably getting a little bit of plus money then on England, I would presume, if that's the case.
I think so.
Why don't we go ahead and roll with the underdog? You can mark me down for England. Why not?
I love it. It's Danny Burke with us here, another edition of Burke's Best Bets, letting you know all the weekend betting action. Danny, we'll let you get out of here. Appreciate all the insight today, and have yourself a lovely and fruitful betting weekend.
Hey, you guys too. Appreciate you having me on. Take care, fellas.
There he is, Danny Burke with us here, Burke's Best Bets, the pride of Chicago. You can check that out in podcast form if you missed anything. We'll get the show wrapped up, and we'll get you to a Thursday evening after the break right here on Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Thursday, it's Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager, Elijah Herbel, Will Wilson taking you through this week as Schmitty's got the week off, and some news and notes to bring you here before we get you out. First off, Bryce McGowan's released by the Hornets. He's found himself a new landing spot, though, in Portland, as the Portland Trailblazers have signed the Nebraska product to a two-way contract, essentially meaning he'll both be playing in the G League and in the NBA as needed moving forward, assuming he impresses the NBA coaches out in Portland. So a quick news and note there from Bryce McGowan's.
Yeah, I mean, he's still got a lot left. I mean, a lot of room to improve. He wasn't terrible for Charlotte. Cool enough, he's now teaming up with Delano Banton.
Oh, that's true.
In Portland.
That's true.
So,
Delano made the move over there. Was that last year or 2 years ago?
I think last year, yeah.
Last year. So.
Maybe, yeah, definitely. So that's cool.
So former Huskers teaming up out there. They never got a chance to play together.
Yeah, because Bryce came right after him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
that's one news and note to bring you. Some sad news to bring you as the Kiffin family announcing today Nebraska native and father of Lane Kiffin, Monty Kiffin, passed away at age 84 peacefully in Oxford, Mississippi today. The pride of Lexington, Nebraska, played on a team in Lexington that way back in the day, this would have been the late 1950s, was actually considered one of the top high school football teams in America. It's a great history lesson I'd love to dive into that I don't actually know enough about to bring you, but I do know that was a team that was well regarded. Some stupid straight number of wins that they had back in the day with Monty Kiffin on the offensive line and defensive line for them. Had a career at Nebraska, a brief stint in the NFL before he returned to Nebraska to coach under both Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne, coaching in the early 1970s, 1966 until 1976. He was at Nebraska. There's some great stories of Monty Kiffin at Nebraska during his time around here. And obviously, was in Lincoln whenever his son Lane Kiffin was born, so a native of Lincoln, Lane Kiffin. Monty Kiffin, though, a great Nebraskan, a great football coach, having stops just about every single notable school and notable NFL team you could think of, a prolific career, passing away this afternoon at the age of 84 down in Oxford, Mississippi. So that is some sad news to bring you. One of the best to ever do it, Monty Kiffin, no longer with us, but a long, long life, passing away today at age 84.
Tampa 2.
Tampa 2. Mm-hmm. That is true. Monty Kiffin's brainchild.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And just a couple of weeks ago, Monty Kiffin was honored here in Nebraska into the state, I believe the State Football Hall of Fame, not the Nebraska Hall of Fame, but the State Football Hall of Fame. Does that sound right to you? I just saw that he was honored a couple of weeks ago. So good for him to get that honor before passing away. Monty Kiffin, though, cheers to you.
Mm-hmm.
A great long life, a great football career, and a great Nebraskan. And he will be remembered fondly here within the state. So that is some sad news to bring you on a Friday.
Today's Thursday.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Yeah. As we wrap up a Thursday and get you prepared for a Friday, we have plenty of good stuff coming your way on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. So we'll get caught up with the one and only pride of Fairbury, Bill Dolman. He'll be joining us on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. I think we'll also have a brief appearance from Jacob Padilla as well to talk about that Nebraska non-conference schedule and some of the things that the Husker basketball team is going to have to get gelled early in the season. And we're hoping for an appearance from the legendary Clausburn.
Ooh, awesome.
So all that coming your way on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, Schmitty's final day of vacation. And Will, your final day in here with us this week. So we really appreciate you. One more day with us. You're stuck around here. So that's coming your way on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. You can check that out wherever you hear us on the radio or streaming online from 4 to 6 tomorrow. Check us out in podcast form. Check us out on YouTube, the Hail Varsity YouTube page. We'll talk with you tomorrow.